please.
All right. Thank you very much, Angie. Thank you. Do I have a room full of frustrated art historians who just want to see more pictures? Thank you very much. I'm really honored that so many of you would take your afternoon to have another session of the Art of Perception. But truthfully, while I love doing plenaries, I really love doing breakouts. We can have more of a conversation. I can take questions and comments during the presentation. Please feel free to interrupt me. It's not as formal as a plenary. And truthfully, I love having the opportunity to dive in a little deeper into some of the issues that I touched upon in the plenary. You saw that I skipped a slide. I always have more slides than I have time, so I'm really grateful to have the next hour, and I promise I will leave time for questions and discussion at the end. Okay, and I don't have that big clock counting down in front of me. So this session is entitled The Art of Perception, Multiple Perspectives for Better Decision Making. And my training is often split into 2 3-hour sections. That what I did for you in an hour is expanded to 3 hours, a lot of interactive exercises. And then in the afternoon, I really focus in on some of the harder issues that you face during the day. These are ideas about decision making, when to make a judgment call, working in the gray area. How do we take the information that we have in front of us? How do we use observation, perception, and inference to make better decisions? And the work of art that I've chosen to open this session with is one that I saw last week. My poor son, because I'm his mother, I sent him to FBI camp for the week. Poor kid. He actually loved it. So he was in FBI camp in Salem, Oregon, and I went to the Hallie Ford Museum at Willamette University, and I saw this work of art, and I thought, what on earth is that? I love discovering museums and works of art that I would have never seen. This is a Native American artist, and she went into her community and she asked families for blankets. She said, would you donate a blanket to my work of art? And then she gave them each a tag and said, write down where the blanket came from and what you used it for in your family. And what I loved about it is I found myself standing in front of this thing for about 25 minutes reading all the tags. Every one of us in this room has a blanket. We have a blanket either in our families or with our children or for the picnic in the backyard. Or we all have blankets, and it was so accessible. I found myself laughing and smiling and even tears reading the tags. And that's how I like to think of art, as being that accessible, something we can all identify with. And my takeaway for you is that art is just to refresh your sense of critical inquiry, because everyone in this room and everyone at this conference has to use your sense of critical inquiry every day. So while I joke about being an art historian, it's not really about the art, but when I see art like this that makes it more accessible, it gets us to think about different things. So I'm going to throw you back into the deep end. You need a partner again. So find your partner next to you. It's going to be a different person this time. Okay? All right. Okay. So I guess I should give you the caveat that everything in this session is going to be a little more complex, a little different, a little edgier than the plenary session, okay? So you already know the ropes. You know the ground rules. You know the ropes. So decide who's going to keep their eyes open and who's going to try to get a mental image of what's being described. All right? And God help anybody in this room who was not at the plenary. You're going to be like, what are you talking about? Okay, so you ready? All right, so half the room, close your eyes. And describers, you have 45 seconds to describe the following slide. Go ahead. All right, stop, take a look, okay? Now, I couldn't have given this to you the first slide. So at first it looks deceptively simple. You have a plate with something on it, you have a glass, you have what appears to be a bottle of wine, a fork and a knife, and then you have a blue-gray top and the background is tan. Raise your hand if you said that the thing on the plate was a pancake. Okay, hands down. And who said it was a piece of ham? Okay. You see, now, just from the get-go, now how many of you said, yeah, there's an eye in the center, don't ask me any questions, just picture that there's an eye in the center of this thing, okay? So again, I would say, we had really split on who said it was a pancake and who said it was a piece of ham, but there was definitely an eye in the center. And I'm wondering, looking at subtleties, now that you're looking at things a little more perceptively, did anyone talk about the shadow of red on the glass, the wine? Because it's a reflection from this bottle. And did anybody mention that the fork tines are turned upside down? Yeah, you did. Good. Good. Now, again, I'm not trying to where's Waldo any of you. I just, in the walk from the big room to this one, I want to make sure you didn't lose those skills of how to describe a work of art to someone. So I'm going to be using art very much in this context where we're talking about nuance and detail and perception and how we can have very different opinions looking at the same thing. Okay? So I wanted to show you the artwork of an artist named Paul Pfeiffer, excuse me. Paul Pfeiffer is a Hawaiian artist. And 2 years ago, after getting a clean PET scan and having a milestone birthday, I took my son to Hawaii, and we discovered Paul Pfeiffer's work in the Honolulu Museum of Art. And what he does is he takes these video stills of boxing matches, and he digitally alters them so the attacker is erased from the picture. And so you have the person who's receiving the punches over and over again, and they can't see where the shots are coming from. Have you ever had a day like that? Have you ever had a day you're getting hit over and over again and you don't know where the shots are coming from? Now, granted, I left the active practice of law over 20 years ago, but I was a litigator for 5 years. I have a lot of appreciation for the days and what you face in a day's work. Nobody can understand what you do. I do and appreciate it. That's why I'm out. No, I'm kidding. So I wanted to show you this, but what I found interesting about Paul Pfeiffer's work is these video stills of these boxing matches are called the caryatids. And for those of you that don't know what the caryatids are, you know what they are? They're these. They're the statues that keep some of the greatest work of Western architecture up. They're stalwart, they're stealth, they're strong, they're stoic. You are the caryatids of the court system. I know you have days like this. I know almost every day. You have days like this. You have relentless judges, you have relentless litigators, you have phones that don't stop ringing, and 500 messages in your email inbox. I get that. But you are this. Because somebody has to keep the walls of the courthouse up and going, and I get this. And I wanted to start with that as the backdrop. I understand where you're coming from, and I might not understand all the technicalities of the issues you're facing now because I've been out of litigation for a long time. But I wanted to touch on some of these, and using art, again, to help you see things differently. So I'm showing you the artwork of Gabriel Daw, who's one of my favorite contemporary artists. That's a work of art made of silk thread. And he installs his works of art in galleries and across rooms. It doesn't obliterate the art, but it makes you see it in a different way. Wherever you stand in this gallery, the pictures are still on the walls, but the sculpture is still in the center. And that's what I want to use art for all the professionals that I work with, to help them see their world differently. Not change it, but see things differently. So in this session, in the session about making better decisions, I'm going to be using abstract works of art to talk about some abstract concepts, because talking about abstract concepts is not easy. It's also not material for a plenary session. Too complicated, too much going on. But I wanted to use abstract works of art to help tackle some of the issues that you face and think about how you can articulate them in the best way to help you either find the solutions or make better decisions. I'm going to change the rules on you. And I'm going to change the rules on you. This is a work by one of my favorite artists. His name is Theaster Gates. What does this look like to you? A gym floor. You got it. You got it. Theaster Gates is from the city of Chicago, and he went to 15 different schools that were decommissioned by the city of Chicago, and they were slated to be destroyed. And he pulled up slats from the different gym floors and created this. It's a wall hanging. It's a work of art. All of us remember the gym floor in high school? You know what this looks like. And to me, I smell sweat, and I hear sneakers that squeak against that floor, and there are scratches, and there are thousands of games, of basketball games and dodgeball games in these gym floors. And he reoriented it, he repurposed it, and he made it a work of art. He merged art and sport and people. And that's what I want to do. And again, he made it accessible because we all know. But what I love about this is the title. It's called Ground Rules Free Throw. I'm changing the ground rules on you. I'm using art to reorient what you do and to think about it and look through a different lens. So I showed you this, JR, right? You have to shift your perspective. And in this breakout session, I also want you to shift your perspective, but I want to do something different this time. Instead of just changing how you see, I want to change how you think about things. And I know they seem to go hand in hand, but they're really not, because I draw the distinction between what you see and what you think. And in the breakout, we're going to move into how do we take what we see and how does it move the needle on what we think. So I heard something on NPR not too long ago. The artist Maya Lin, the person who designed the Vietnam War Memorial, was talking about the global map. Now, if you grew up in the Western Hemisphere, if you grew up in North America like I did, this was the map you saw in 3rd grade. Remember it used to pull down? This was, my son looks at me like I'm from Mars when I say that. Yep, we pulled it down and sometimes it would snap up, right? He says, Mom, don't tell me. Just don't tell me. So this is the world as you saw it, with North America and South America on the left, the Atlantic Ocean in the center, Africa, Europe, Asia, and Australia. This is the way we were oriented to the world starting in 3rd grade. But Maya Lin made the point on the radio, and I was trying to envision this because I was listening on the radio. She said, if you grew up on the other side of the world, this is the map you grew up with. So Africa, Asia, and Europe were on the left. North America and South America were on the right, and the Pacific Ocean was in the center, not the Atlantic. And you look at that, and it looks funny to us because we didn't grow up. But think about it. If you grow up on the other side of the world, your whole orientation is going to be different, and we don't think about that. We don't think about other people's perspectives when making decisions. As I said to you, nobody sees the way you do, literally or figuratively. And after Maya Lin's piece, I went online and I looked up the map. Sure enough, if you grew up in Japan, this is the map on your 3rd grade wall. So just think about that visual orientation and how that changes the way you think about places in the world. And then in the bigger scheme, people are going to make decisions based on how they view themselves in the world. So this brings me to one of my favorite photographers. And his name is Joel Meyerowitz. And the French have a saying for everything. Spoiler alert, this is the subject for my new book. The French have a saying, and this saying I love. It's called entre chien et loup. It means between the dog and the wolf. And literally translated from French, it's that moment, you all know the moment when it goes from twilight to night. You know how it goes from purple to blue in like 10 seconds. So Joel Meyerowitz takes pictures, and he calls his pictures Between the Dog and the Wolf, and he captures that moment of twilight when it goes from day to night. And he has these beautiful pictures by the water. So this is one of the Between the Dog and the Wolf. But professionally, the dog and the wolf means something different to me. He takes pictures also of swimming pools, you can't see the swimming pool, with a view of the ocean. And the swimming pool is the dog. It's the safe, the known, the charted. Everybody's been in a swimming pool, you know what it feels like. The wolf is the ocean. You can't see in the water. You can't feel the bottom. There's the threat of riptide. But what could possibly compare with swimming with the waves in the ocean? And so professionally, how do you straddle the dog and the wolf? How do you stay safe and do what works, but when do you go into the uncharted? When are you willing to go to the exit ramp of your comfort zone, as they say? When are you willing to go to the other side, try something new? Remember the book I showed you over the wall? When are you willing to try something new in the hopes of making something more efficient or making it better or making it more fair? And I believe that great leaders and people who really care about their jobs are willing to go to the wolf. If you stay with the dog all the time, nothing's going to go wrong. You're not going to get fired. You're going to be okay, but you're not going to be great. And I believe innovation and creativity and going to the side of the wolf is a good thing. And I love Joel Meyerowitz's photograph, so it's a double. The other thing I want you to think about is finding the extraordinary in the ordinary. You know, you all see this. I always say you all do the same thing every day, but no 2 days are ever the same. What are you looking at here? What is this? It's a milk crate. It's a stunning milk crate. It's a painting of a milk crate that if you look at it long enough, you're going to see its architectural elements, and you're going to see its curves and its lines, and you're going to start thinking of clocks and towers and moving parts. It's a milk crate. It's a plastic milk crate, and it's a fiction created by an artist. It actually is a painting by Caleb Considine. But I show it to you to remind you to see the extraordinary in the ordinary, and that's part of going between the dog and the wolf. You know, you have to clean your glasses sometimes. You have to see things differently, because when we're working with the same resources every day, I want you to see the potential in those resources. I also want you to use the art of perception. I told you about solving problems. The asparagus problem we had before, where Manet didn't give the money back. Here's another set of problems. These are photographs by Irving Penn, and they're called the corner portraits. And what he did is he constructed these corners, and he invited famous people to come pose in the corners. And he made a whole series of them called the Cornered Portraits. This is the Duchess of Windsor. This is the artist Marcel Duchamp. And that's the choreographer, I'm losing her name. Martha Graham, thank you. I kept thinking Merce Cunningham, it's Martha Graham, thank you. And he asked them to pose. And instead of turning into the corners and complaining and saying, I can't pose in a corner, they turned out. And they became expressive, and they showed who they were. And so again, I want to use art as a mechanism to get you out of a corner. How can you think about solving problems with the resources that you already have? And he has about probably a dozen to 15 of these corner portraits. And I look at them, they're all famous people in how they chose to express themselves, and none of them turned inward. They used the corner to their best advantage. I also want to look at art as a way of challenging your assumptions. You know, we all make assumptions every day. We have to. It's part of the work that you do, and so much of the work that the people, you know, in the intelligence community and law enforcement and medicine. And I was in the National Gallery about 6 months ago, and I walked into one of the galleries on the second floor, and this is what I saw. But more than what I saw is what I smelled. I walked into the gallery, I said, what is that smell? I know it, and I can't identify it. What is it? So I walked in, I got in closer to each of these sculptures. There were no stanchions. You could get as close as you wanted. And there were 14 of them. Half of them were brown and half of them were white. And when I got up close, I realized the brown ones were made of chocolate and the white ones were made of soap. And they're two very distinct smells. And the artist, believe it or not, licked the 7 chocolate ones to get them to look like this. And she bathed with the 7 soap ones to get them to look like that. So the entire work of art, you ready, was called Lick and Lather. Lick and Lather. And if you want to say she had too much time on her hands, it's okay, but it's more than that. Because what this installation did, it challenged every assumption I made about bust sculpture. That it's white marble, that it's white men, that it's 18th century and it's French. This turned all of it on its head. It's still portrait bust sculpture. Chocolate and soap, lick and lather. And again, whether you like art or contemporary art, that's really not the issue today. It's about using art, again, to address the sense of critical inquiry. And to go back to one of the things that I talked about in the plenary, no two people see anything the same way. And this has to factor into decision making. I'm showing you Tony Metelli's sculpture. I wrote about it in my book because I was just fascinated. It's called, you probably guessed it, Sleepwalker. And it was a sculpture that was installed on the campus of Wellesley in 2014. And they installed Tony Metelli. It's outside the museum, and Wellesley is in Massachusetts. And there was an absolute outcry on campus. It's an all-girls school. And the women signed a petition. Women's college, thank you. It's a women's college, you're absolutely right. Right. So they installed this on the campus of an all-women's college, and there was an outcry, and women signed a petition and said, take it down. Take it down. It's threatening, it's intimidating, it's ugly, and we hate it. And the college had a real problem with that because they felt it was censorship. And so they dug a little deeper and they held town hall meetings and said, what's the problem here? And they said, for those of us who are victims of sexual assault, it's really intimidating. It's really scary. And when we're walking home at night, it looks like a threatening male figure in his underwear. Now, I had seen this a million times, never crossed my mind. But you know what? You can never say how someone else sees something. And so I think that the exchange of ideas in the museum community, in the art community, and in the college community, it was a healthy exchange of ideas. The artwork stayed up. And I supported that decision because I think dialogue is important. And if you took the artwork down, the dialogue would disappear. And as I said to you in the plenary, we can't look away from things we don't like. We can't look away from things we don't understand. And we can't look away from things that make us uncomfortable because that's what's in the world. And if we took down all the art that made certain people uncomfortable, there wouldn't be a lot to look at. But I think this was a particularly spirited dialogue that merited the idea of looking at both sides and thinking about the ideas that were generated on both sides. And it brought in a larger community than just the college. It brought people in from the community, and it brought in art historians, and it was the foundation for how do we make decisions? Does this stay? Does it go? And we went back to the decision, who decided on putting this on campus in the first place? So we have to look at decisions through the lens of saying, you know what? No two people see anything the same way. So what's another way of shifting our perspective to think about decision making. In 1993, this is the Massachusetts Mental Health Center outside of Boston. And it was a large psychiatric facility that was slated to be torn down. And a number of the families were very upset because the families whose members had been treated here, it was part of their history, and they didn't want the hospital just torn down without any recognition. So what they did is they commissioned an artist, Anna Schuleit-Haber, to come to the Massachusetts Mental Health Center and create some kind of memorial to the institution. So she walked through the halls, and this is what she did. She filled every room and every clinic and every examining room and every meeting room with, she had 80 volunteers and 28,000 potted plants. And she filled the whole hospital, and they opened it to the public for 4 days. And people could come in, and they made videotapes of this mental health center filled with these blooming flowers. And when they asked Anna Schuleit-Haber why she chose this as her installation, she said, because I've spent time as an artist in residence in mental health centers, and there is a conspicuous absence of flowers. Nobody sends flowers to a mental health patient saying, get well soon, or best wishes for a speedy recovery. People don't do that because we have a stigma. She said, and I wanted to change perception so that I could change behavior. And so I love that when Bloom was deinstalled and they eventually tore the building down, they took all the 28,000 potted plants and they distributed them to mental health centers and psychiatric care centers in the Boston metropolitan area so that the flowers could begin to change perceptions. So, sometimes the changes are small to change perception, but it will affect decision-making down the road. Another example of how we shift perception in our decision-making. I have a lot of friends in New York City in the art community, and they had been sending emails saying I needed to go to St. John the Divine. There was an art exhibition there I needed to see before it closed. And St. John the Divine, for those of you who know, it's up in Harlem on 110th Street. And I was home one Sunday and the show was closing, so I went. Enough people said, go see it, it's Jane Alexander, go see it. I didn't know who Jane Alexander was. I didn't know her artwork, but I trusted my friends. So I took the bus and I got to the cathedral, and this is what was the inside. These creepy, half-animal, half-human figures. They were in the naves and the windows and the aisles, and they were behind the bars, and they just gave me the creeps. And I couldn't see any labels, and church services were just letting out as I had come in. It was on a Sunday. And I thought, you know what, let me ask people what they think. So this elderly woman who looked like she had been part of the church for a long time came out with a walker, and I said to her, excuse me, ma'am, what do you think of this artwork? And she practically spit on me. She said, it's the work of the devil. It doesn't belong in this church. And then the guard tapped me on the shoulder and said, don't listen to her. This is the coolest thing we've had in St. John the Divine in a long time. So I spent the next hour just eavesdropping on conversations, listening to families tell their children, listening to people, and asking questions. What do you think of this? Because I went in with a clean slate. I knew nothing about Jane Alexander. So after listening to all these people, then I took some notes, and then I went home and I did my research on her. She grew up in apartheid South Africa. And this was her response to growing up in apartheid South Africa. And she was given this forum in St. John the Divine in Harlem to install her work. And so by putting all those pieces together, but the most important one, I was the one doing the listening. I wasn't doing the talking. I wasn't the docent. I wasn't the art person. I was listening. And I never forgot this. Because again, it wasn't really about the art. I thought the art was kind of ugly and creepy, and it was intimidating to me, but I needed to hear what other people said. And most people thought it was really neat and really cool. So I think about that. When you're ready to jump to a conclusion, I said you reach for what you want to see, just step back a minute and think, you know what, maybe there's another way to look at this. Maybe there's another way to think about this. So this all comes down to practicality, because as I said in the plenary, I know that you're not looking at art for a living. Nobody. Nobody that I work with. It's quite far from it. And I wanted to give you an illustration about stepping back and new perspectives, how that can help you make good decisions. And I'm showing you a video still. I'm really lucky. Cops give me all these pictures and cases and things that I can use in my program. And one of the departments, the homicide division at the NYPD, gave me these video stills. In 2010, a real estate agent was killed, and she was real estate agent to the stars, to the Ramones, and she sold big pieces of real estate. She was not a very nice person, but she was killed in her apartment, brutally murdered, and this was the prime suspect, Natavia Lowry. And they had video still of Natavia going out and coming in, the day of the murder. And the prosecutors watched the video all day. Couldn't find it. They were looking for that aha moment, looking and playing it over. And Fox News called about 3 o'clock in the afternoon and said, we want the video stills for the news tonight. We want to show it on the news because this was a high-profile murder. So prosecutor's office released the video stills, and they were on for about 6 seconds on Fox News. That's a long time on TV to see video stills for 6 seconds. And one of the prosecutor's husbands picked up the phone and said, honey, I see what you're looking for. He said she walked out of the building with her cargo pants right side out and walked back in with them turned inside out. Why? Because there was blood on them. And she didn't want anyone to see the blood on her cargo pants. So my question for you is, how did the prosecutors look at the video all day long, over and over and over again, and the husband saw it in 6 seconds? It's because when you're looking so hard, you don't see what's right in front of you. That's a classic mahogany table. It's right there. And you know what the interesting end to the story is? It was the pants that swayed the jury and found her guilty of murder. So it's the idea of stepping back and looking at the big picture, and remember, maybe I'm looking too hard. And I know all of you have to make decisions in very short amount of time, but if you can step away from your desk, step away from the screen, clear your head. You know, I use that phrase all the time. I need to clear my head. I work alone. So I need to clear my head, and sometimes it can make the difference between solving the problem and just walking away from the problem. So all of this comes back to, for me, the work of an artist named Mark Hirsch, when we're looking at things and not seeing what we're looking at. I guess it was back in 2012, Mark Hirsch is a professional photographer, and he got a new iPhone. And on his way to work one morning, he had passed this oak tree every day. And he got out of the car and he took a picture of this oak tree. And he was so excited by the quality of the iPhone's picture that he decided that for the next 365 days, he was going to get out of his car and take a picture of that oak tree. And I know what you're thinking, way too much time on his hands. But he published a book called That Tree. And it's a stunning book. And I wanted to show you some of the images because, as I said to you, you all do the same thing every day, but no 2 days are ever the same. Some days, your day looks like this. Did you ever have a day that looks like this? You just can't see yourself out of the fog. And then there are other days you can't see the forest through the trees, no pun intended. And then there are other days that you're purely relegated to the background, and it's everybody else that takes precedent. But what I want to make sure is that when you're communicating your issues and your problems, if your day looks like this, you don't speak and say, well, it's just a regular old day like this. All your days are different. The tree may be the same, but the circumstances, the problems, the situations, the litigants, the parties, the details, the nuances, they're all very different, and they deserve your attention. And I hope that this program can help you focus in on some of those details and nuances that will ultimately help you make better decisions. But this is hard work. It's not easy. As I said, I've been doing this for a long time, working with many different groups. And 2 weeks ago, I was at the Museum of Modern Art, and I looked down on the floor and I saw this. I almost tripped over it. It was in this special exhibition gallery, and I was with my friend who shaved my hair and made me look in the mirror. I said to her, what is this? She said, well, you figure it out. That's your thing. So I got down on the floor, and I looked at it at eye level. And don't you know, when I looked at it at eye level, I found out that it was a beautiful piece of Carrara white marble, and the top was concave, and it was filled with milk. And when I tell you that it was filled with milk, it was perfectly flush with the surface. And so then I said, I have to read the label on this. Normally I don't allow people to read the label, but when I'm looking, I can read the label. And the artist's name is Wolfgang Lieb. And every day, they fill this marble with milk. The curators spread it over so it's completely flush, and every night, that's the artist himself, every night they come back and they take cheesecloth and they take the milk out and wring it out and do it again because it will curdle if it's left overnight. And I show this to you not to show you weird works of performance art. It's not that. It's that this takes work. And the process of putting the milk in and taking the milk out is as much a part of the artwork as seeing it on the floor. So everything that I'm asking you to do today, you have enough on your plate. You have enough during the day to do. And I want this to become automatic. Before you're about to hit send, I would love one of you to step back and say, maybe there's a better way I can say this. Or before you yell at the judge, you say, you know what, do I really need to yell at the judge to get what I need? Is there a better way that I could ask for this? Barack Obama? You hate Barack Obama? You're thinking about taxes, you're lamenting, you're sad, you're thinking about Trump, you're thinking, I don't want to think about this, you're thinking about all kinds of things. It's now going to affect how you see Lincoln and how you see the next set of slides that I put up there. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is called bias. Your personal experience with this particular person, good, bad, or indifferent, I don't care what it was, is going to affect how you see things going forward. That's what bias is. And you know what? Biases are not necessarily bad. You just have personal experience, whether your taxes, whether it was discussion of race, whether it was where the country was, however you feel about Barack Obama is going to shape how you look at that slide of Lincoln. This Yeah, fine. Washington and Lincoln, we all know who they are. But I watched all your faces when I put Kehinde Wiley's formal portrait of Barack Obama up. I watched your faces. Some of you, there was an immediate recognition. Some of you, there was a smile. Some of you looked down. Some of you rolled your eyes. That's what bias is. And you know what? I'm going to shift it on you again. Now you have another set of feelings and ideas about Michelle Obama. Like her, don't like her, indifferent to her, supported her vegetable garden, couldn't care less about her vegetable garden. It's going to shape how you think about things going forward because you know these people. Your lives were affected by these people. And when I try to explain to people about bias, they shut down. I'm not biased. Everyone is biased. And biases are not all bad. It's taking your own personal experience, putting it over your lens, and seeing the world through your lens. It's what we naturally do. And I don't want to change that. I want to make each of you aware of it. So that when you're making some of the most difficult decisions at work, I want you to step back and ask yourself, am I too biased in this situation? And do I need to look at this a little more objectively? It's not easy to do, but we're all biased. Now I want you to take a look at this photograph. It's from 1974. Take a look at the photograph. What'd you see in it?
A cop chasing a black man.
A cop chasing a black man. Anything else that you remember? An English cop. Yeah, Bobby, right? He had a hat on. He didn't have his feet on the ground. Where was it? On a corner? Urban graffiti? Guess what? They're both cops. Notice that the guy in uniform is not looking at the black man. They're both looking ahead. They're both chasing a suspect. The cop in uniform is behind the undercover cop, and both of their eyes are focused. But they ran this as an ad for the Metropolitan Police Department of Scotland Yard, who I also work with. And they put it up in buses and trains and said, what do you see? Testing your own biases. And they were using it as an ad for diversity and inclusion in recruitment for the police department. It's very thought-provoking. And only you know what you thought when you saw this. But you're looking at two police officers. And this struck me when I saw it. I never forgot this photograph. And the cops in London showed me that they used it. And I said, do you still use it? And they said, it's very powerful. They do. So again, illustrating what bias is. So now, I want you to go back to the model that I gave you. What do I know? What don't I know? If I had the opportunity to get more information, what do I need to know? And use it for better decision making in more complex situations. So what do you definitively see here? What do we have?
4 women crying.
Grief-stricken women, and you said 4 white women crying. But look at this woman second from the right. You see her? Second from the right? Nobody's arm is quite that long. This is a 5th person back here. That would be a bionic arm if it stretched across 3 people. So we have 4 women upset and a 5th person. What else do we know? Where are they?
Utah.
Bias. See, Utah. They're on a porch, right? They're on a porch. You know what my cops in New York say? They say, well, they're not in New York. Yeah, we know that. We know they're not in New York. Okay, how else? How would you describe? How are they dressed?
Like Mormon wives.
Like, I'm sorry?
Like Mormon wives.
Like Mormon wives. If I didn't know what a Mormon wife looked like, give me visual observation of how they're dressed.
Well, this would be wives in a polygamous group.
Okay, go away from what you know and tell me what you see.
Very old-fashioned.
There you go. There you go. You see the difference?
Yep.
She said, polygamist, wives, Mormons. And I said to her, that's what you know. Tell me what you see. And then she turned and she said, modest, old-fashioned clothing. You see the difference? And I'm okay with a reference to a Mormon, but are you sure these are Mormons? No, they're not, in fact. And believe it or not, they're not even from Utah. So I've had people tell me, people have said to me, they're Amish, or Quaker, or Pentecostal. I had a woman raise her hand. She said, they're Ohio Amish, not Pennsylvania Amish. You know? And guess what? They're all wrong. Everyone's wrong. So you know what? Don't box yourself in. Say, you know what? They look like they belong to a religious organization. How's that? Leave the door open. And the other thing is when you're choosing your words, when people say, oh, well, they're dressed conservatively. You know what? I'm dressed conservatively too. I hope I don't look like that. All right? Conservative is one of those things. Be careful. Modest, old-fashioned is all good. Not body conscious, not revealing, that's all good. What don't we know? What have they seen or heard that caused this reaction? What is their relationship to each other? Why are they dressed that way? Where are they geographically? And if you had the opportunity to get more information, what do you need to know? Who are these women? Who took this picture and what's going on? So the answer is, in very revealing terms, which is what I told you in the plenary, go broad. This picture was taken in 2008, 10 miles outside of El Dorado, Texas. The Yearning for Zion compound. Do you remember? The state of Texas Administration for Children and Welfare Services came to the compound and took 439 children away because there were allegations of abuse and neglect and pedophilia. You name it, they were doing it on this, or they alleged that they were doing it on this compound. Now, the group itself was a breakaway faction of the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Breakaway church from the Mormon church, but not Mormons. And all these journalists came in from all over the world and took pictures of these they told the mothers, the aunts, the grandmothers, get on the porch, we're taking your kids. Now, I don't care who you are and what religious organization you belong to, it is gut-wrenching when children are forcibly taken. If you try to take my kid, I'll kill you. But if you have a gun, I'm not going to kill you. And in Texas, they had a lot of guns, and they came in and they took these children. And they were afraid of another Waco-like situation. So they were armed and they were ready. And so this is another instance of getting the backstory. You see how it is? You know, when I put this up, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, one of my groups in New York said, oh, that's that crazy cult. You know what? Crazy cult doesn't tell me anything. And when you jump to that conclusion, it's hard to work your way back. So that's where the model of what do I know, what don't I know, and if I had the opportunity to get more information, what do I need to know, is very useful. Try this one. Now, I should tell you, and I didn't get to this in the plenary, while you're looking at the picture, there are 3 things I don't talk about on the road, because I'm on the road all over the country, all over the world. I don't talk about guns, I don't talk about God, and I don't talk about politics. Because I don't want people making assumptions about me and my demographic and how I might feel. But this picture was too good to let go, and I broke my rules. Where are we? What's going on here? Looks like we're in church, right? See, you're all smart. There's some people say, well, it looks like a courtroom. You know it's not a courtroom. But a lot of people will look at it and say it looks like a courtroom. We're in a church. How would you describe it to me? We have a woman on the ground clutching her heart. She appears to be crying. Does anyone seem to be upset that there's a woman on the ground crying? Except that little girl. Everybody else around her is clapping and dancing and celebrating, and just the little girl next to her is trying to comfort her. So, as I said, I broke my own rule. This picture was taken, it's a New York Times photograph, and it was taken at the First Corinthian Baptist Church in Harlem in New York City. Taken on the night of November 4th, 2008, 5 minutes after Barack Obama won the election. Now, I show it to you because it says a couple things. It says that body language can be ambiguous, right? That this woman is actually overcome with joy and disbelief and exaltation that the first African-American man has been elected president of the United States, unless you're in a detective in Amy's NYPD Art of Perception class who raised his hand and said, I could not make this up. He said, how do you know she didn't vote for John McCain? All right? That's what he said. How do you know she didn't vote for John McCain? So I said, what did you just say? Everybody laughed. So 6 months later, I was in Washington, D.C. at a leadership conference, and I told that story. I said, yeah, my detective raised his hand. How do you know she didn't vote for John McCain? And a black woman raised her hand, and she stood up. She said, yeah, I get the detective's humor, but he's relying on the assumption that all black people voted for Barack Obama, and they didn't because I didn't. Touche, right? So what do you say? You understand the detective's humor, and you understand the woman's retort. How do you reconcile the two? And here's my answer. I hated practicing law. I hated law school, but I learned a lot. I couldn't do what I'm doing now if I wasn't a lawyer. And one of the doctrines that I took from law school that was so valuable, if you're going to make an assumption based on race, age, gender, religion, sexual orientation, or sexual identity, you need to invoke the doctrine of the totality of the circumstances. So in this case, is it a fair assumption, comma, based on race, comma, to assume that the woman on the floor is overjoyed that Barack Obama was elected president? The answer is yes. Is it possible that she voted for John McCain? Of course it's possible, but she probably would not be at the First Corinthian Baptist Church to watch the election results. You need to make assumptions in your work, undeniable. So the best bright line rule I can give you, it's a very gray area. If you're going to make an assumption based on all those things, gender, age, religion, sexual orientation, sexual identity, if you can't fit it into the totality of the circumstances to back up your assumption, don't make the assumption. Find another way to say it. Because I've seen too many people trip over their words and taste shoe leather. You know, all Jews do this on the Sabbath, or all gay people do this. Don't do it. But you need to fit it into the big picture if you can. Is it fair enough to talk about race here? Sure it is. Everyone in the picture we can see is black. It was taken the night Obama won. We need to talk about it, but we have to be educated in how we're making our assumptions. Find your partner again. God, that was the fastest 45 minutes. Oh my gosh. Okay, ready? Now these are going to be abstract concepts. Remember, just now you switch places. The person who described before is listening now. All right, ready? All right, half the room, shut your eyes. Half the room, shut your eyes. 45 minutes to, 45 minutes, 45. Woo, all right. All right. Oh yes, I'll be having a glass of wine later. Okay, 45 seconds to describe the following slide. Ready? Go ahead. All right, stop, take a look. Take a look. You know what? You know what? It's absolutely hysterical for me because so many of you were drawing it for your partners. You were like doing this, and it goes like this, and I'm like, their eyes are closed. Maybe it helped you talk about it. I don't know. All right, so you see that talking about an abstract work of art is much harder than talking about something that's representational, but I hope that you can think about how many times you have to describe an abstract concept to somebody and you want to say, just listen to me. Just listen to me and you'll get it, and it's not that simple. How many of you use the word number 7? Yeah, okay. How many of you, and again, you're trying to make this concrete, how many of you said a horseshoe? Anybody? Yeah, there's a horseshoe in the back. How many of you said a diamond? Anybody? A diamond shape and then a circular shape? There's no right way to describe this, but if you're smart, and hopefully this is like your 5th or 6th exercise with me, you're realizing that the key to doing this is taking a few seconds just to look. Before you open your mouth, just see what you're looking at, collect your thoughts in a microsecond, and then start talking. Because you're not talking about something that is crystal clear, and you say to your partner, all right, work with me on this. I'm going to do the best that I can, and think about how you need to do that in a work situation, right? All right, switch places. Okay? All right, ready? Okay, 45 seconds to describe the following slide. Ready, go. right, stop, take a look. Okay? Now, all right, I only have 15 minutes. I only have 15 minutes left with you, and I want to leave a good 6 to 7 minutes for questions and discussion. So I have one takeaway. You figured out that each of the exercises has been designed to have a professional takeaway, and this one has one professional takeaway. When do you have to make order out of chaos? How many times are you barraged with information? There is no coherent narrative. There's no beginning, no middle, end, and it's up to you to come up with the coherent narrative. Because someone is, tell me what's happening. And you say, well, where do I begin? How do I do that? We have a million things going on. So in this picture, it's the same artist that did the upside-down groceries, the lipsticks, and the bucket, but you have a tree trunk with an American flag wrapped around it, a cow or bull skull. You have sort of dancing crossed pink legs. My son described it. He has to go to the bathroom, is the way he described it. A light bulb with Arabic letters and numbers across the bottom, all in shades of pink and red.
What does it say on the bottom?
Oh, it says the xenophobic music director, the xenophobic, I think it says movie director or our foreign policy. Okay? And it's signed, I know I'm not supposed to be political, and it's signed by James Rosenquist. So I show this to you because more often than not, more of you in this room have to make order out of chaos. And I just want you to have an exercise in thinking about a coherent narrative. All right, so very quickly before I wrap up, I want you to look at this picture, and this is an exercise I use a lot all over the country. And normally I make you write down 4 words, but let's just yell them out. Give me 4 words to describe what you see in the picture. Teenagers, friendship, stoop, yay, outside New York I hear stoop. Happiness, summer, my cops always say eviction notice. I think the best line I've heard for the 4 words are 4 teenagers, 5th wheel. And I make them write down 4 words. So you get the gist of what's happening. It's teenagers chilling, summertime stoop, city, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I saw this picture in the New York Times 6 years ago, and it had a 4-word caption, which inspired me to design the exercise. And I said, oh my gosh, the New York Times messed up. The caption doesn't match the picture. And I grew up in the New York metropolitan area, I was all ready to email the editors and say, you messed up. And the caption said, Muslim teenagers observing Ramadan. And in my head, I said, what? And I said, it just can't be. I said, well, before I tell you that, I went on to read the article. And what the article said was, as you know, during Ramadan, Muslims do not eat from sunrise to sundown. And during that time, male teenage Muslims wear flip-flops, socks, and slippers so they won't be tempted to pick up a sports game because they don't have the energy because they haven't eaten since sun up. So the article was about Muslim teenagers and how they observe Ramadan. And so in my mind, I was all ready to write to the editors because I said you have boys and girls and they're kind of flirting and laughing and their skin showing. And I was all ready to say you're dead wrong. But had I read the article, it was about something else. And so my takeaway from this is be careful of what you think your preconceived notions are going to tell you about something because you really could be dead wrong. It could lead you down the long road. I had a woman in one of my medical classes wearing a hijab. And she came up to me afterwards and she said, I'm so glad you showed the Muslim teenagers because people think that all Muslim women look like me. They also look like this. These are Albanian Muslims in Ridgewood, Queens. They're no less Muslim because they're not wearing headwear. So it's just a caveat to all of us to be careful of what our preconceived notions tell us in the ultimate decision making. I'm going to skip this one. Okay, one of the last things I want to talk about is pattern recognition. I'm showing you 2 pictures here, and I won't spend a lot of time on it, but as I said, you all do the same thing every day, but no 2 days are ever the same. You know what patterns work, you know what doesn't work. You've seen a case like this 1,000 times, but you know the cases aren't the same. So when I put these 2 pictures up and I say to my classes, okay, who's going to tell me similarities and differences? I hear all sorts of things. You know, reclining women, there's a black woman in each picture, there's a cat in each picture, there's a black cat here, white cat here. But what struck me the most was about 6 months ago, I had a group of law enforcement leaders together. And I said, who's going to tell me similarities and differences? And a woman raised her hand and she said, each picture has paneling in the background separated by an orange stripe. Here and here. And I looked at her and I said, you're kidding, right? That's really the first thing you saw? And then it dawned on me. I said to her, what do you do? She sent him on a task force to combat human trafficking and child pornography. You know what she does all day? She looks at videos. She has to make sure that the background, the upholstery, the furniture, the wallpaper, she can't look at the subject anymore. She looks at the background so when they make a bust, they know they're in the right place. Wow. And it struck me because look at her visual intelligence. She doesn't need to tell me about the reclining women. She goes right to what she's good at. Everyone brings something to the table. And selfishly, multiple perspectives make for better decision making. Solicit as many perspectives. I don't use the words diversity, inclusion. I use multiple perspectives because that includes all of us. Bring those multiple perspectives to the table and you'll end up with better and more informed decisions. So I'm going to skip my patterns of recognition. Don't tell me his wife threw him out. You know, this is a guy, obnoxiously short shorts, pink shirt, bags. Where is he? He looks like he's in the airport, right? If it were 2018, he'd have a cell phone plugged in, charging it. But the truth is, there's a giveaway in the picture. There are camera lights in the corners. You know why? Because he's made of wax and resin. He's a work of art. He's called, you ready? Man on the Floor of the Orlando Airport. And the reason I show him to you is for two reasons. This is what, believe it or not, that's him. Yeah. But he looks so real, you think he's going to wake up, and people take his pictures, they can't believe he's really there. I show him to you for two reasons. Number one, if you do all the things we talked about, both in the plenary and today, it's great. Incorporate all that in, think about multiple perspectives, think about all those things that go into decision making, and you know what, some days you're going to be dead wrong. It's just going to happen. It's the human condition. Learn from it, laugh at yourself if you can, and move on. But the second reason I show this to you is I train the rookies in the DA's office in Manhattan. And about 6 years ago, I put this picture up, and I said, okay, who's going to tell me what they see? And this young, newly minted, earnest attorney raises his hand and he says, it's a sculpture on the floor of the Orlando Airport by Dwayne Hanson. And I said, how do you know that? Like, took the wind out of my sails. And with the utmost of pride, he stood up, or he sat up, and he said, because Dwayne Hanson was my father. Be still my heart. Dwayne Hanson is one of my favorite artists, and this was Dwayne Hanson Jr., and he works in the ADA's office. So my second takeaway for you is you never know who you're going to meet. Right? All right. Enough said. How am I going to conclude? What are your takeaways? Number one, visual intelligence. See through the noise. Look, here's the artist, Lou Bolin, right here. See through the noise. You are all barraged with more than you can possibly process. See through it. See what you can say and see what matters. Number two, please, I love this photograph. Do not underestimate the power of face-to-face conversation. Email is terrific. Memos, team meetings, do not hesitate to have a face-to-face conversation. I'm thrilled to tell you that my book that we're going to be selling out there has been purchased by 20th Century Fox. They're going to make a television show out of it. And I'm very excited about that, but the writer who's converting it from a book to a script, we were talking about this painting about 2 weeks ago. He said, Amy, have you ever seen Rainy Day in Paris? I said, of course, every art historian has seen it. He said, do you see the cat in the picture? I said, what are you talking about? Cat in the picture. There is no cat in the picture. And I got off the phone with him. I said, Rashad, there's no cat. And I looked at every single detail. Balconies, buildings, sidewalks. You know where the cat is? Look at the negative space between the man and the woman.
Oh my God.
Oh my gosh. Now all I can see is the dumb cat. No two people see anything the same way. Quick picture, Nicholas Nixon. These are his works. This woman second from the right is named Bibi Brown. It's Bibi Brown and her three sisters. And Nicholas Nixon took a picture of them every year from 1976 to 2015. And they're often exhibited together. If you ever get a chance to see the Brown sisters, do, because you see their whole lives. You see them as four sisters through the years. And it's a reminder to all of you, your litigants have whole lives. They're in the court for a reason. We know they're there for a reason, and I know that's how you're involved. But don't lose the bigger picture when it comes to them. They're people. And they're people with whole lives. And I know it's hard to remember that sometimes. I don't have time for this one. I know, I'm sorry. This is an unfinished painting by Cezanne, a reminder to all of you. When there are gaps, don't think of them as negative, think of them as potential. If someone leaves your team, well, maybe somebody else's strengths can fill in. Instead of concentrating on what's missing, think about what you might have. Step back. It's the best thing I can tell you about decision-making, about really good decision-making. Step back and try to see the whole picture and the small details, because then you can get to the essence of the problem and really communicate about what needs to be communicated. Do you know what this is? It's Georgia O'Keeffe's painting of the Washington Monument. It's just the essence of the monument in all its color and its light. beware of social media. There's a lot of information out there on social media. Use it wisely and use it judiciously. Your courts are well-oiled machines. They have been working for a long time, but you are the reason they work. Every piece is in place. Don't ever underestimate the role that you play, because without you, everything would come to a stop. And my last slide. This is a picture by Kehinde Wiley on the right of Ice-T. And it's a reminder to all of us, this is a painting from 1789 by David of Napoleon. Let's look back, let's look forward, let's incorporate as many perspectives as possible, because that's truly the key to better and more informed decision making. That's all my information, and I will be happy to meet any of you when I'm out there signing books. Thank you again for coming to the breakout session. I really appreciate it. All right. So before I have to be out at the desk, I do have 5 minutes. Any questions? Here's a question for you. And I ask all my sessions that I do training sessions, and you've had 2 hours. It's usually 3 to 4. Are there any takeaways? I've given you a lot of information in 2 hours. Anything that is particularly relevant to you as a takeaway in your work? And you know what? If you say no, I have a thick skin. At least you saw some great art for 2 hours. Anything that comes to mind that you're willing to share? Or question? Anything? Wow, yes, okay, thank you.
I work with civil litigants, so I have a lot of different people that come in. So constantly reminding that we don't know the whole story. They've only heard what we're telling them for the first time. So try to get rid of the bias. When someone walks in, oh, they're homeless, oh, they're on drugs or mental. Yeah, so try to remember that and try to keep reinforcing that.
Exactly. And you know, if it's any comfort to you, because I travel so much, I jump to conclusions all the time about people next to me in the airline, about people, you know, in the ticket agent, and more than half the time I'm wrong. And you know, there's this great sign, the New York City Police Department gave me this sign to put in my apartment, and it says, think that you might be wrong. And so every time you're dealing with a new situation, just say to yourself, okay, I've already made some judgments here in my head. That's where they stay. And try to step back and think, you know, let me start as fresh as possible. Every litigant. And you know what? You get tired. You know, you've seen it before, you know it, but each case is different. Yes?
Also not letting the art turn you into a cynical person. Because sometimes you look at a picture and you say to yourself, what am I missing?
There you go.
What's not in here?
That's right.
Part of the story might not be told. And sometimes it's all, like you said, it's right there in front of us, like the man.
Right there.
It's right there. We're looking for something
else. That's right. And you know, I have such wonderful accounts from police officers. How many crimes were solved? The answer was right there at the crime scene. And we need to just look in front of us. We just get, you know, and I can't hold it up, it's our phones that are distracting us from looking around us. So, thank you. Good. Anything else?
What's your TV show going to be called?
My TV show is going to be called The Art of Perception. And the main character, the only creepy thing about this TV show is the main character is going to be named Amy Herman. That's a little weird. And the other thing, I'm doing a TED Talk in October, which I'm very excited about. And the last thing I want to tell you, and I want to leave you with this, about engaging in the world around you. 5 years ago, October 2012, I was exhausted. I had trained 5 police departments in 5 days. Hurricane Sandy had hit it home. Did you ever just get on a plane and you just want to be home? You're tired, you don't want to talk to anybody, and I was just about to put my earbuds in. And who stops at my row but Chatty Betty? Have you ever been sitting next to a Chatty Betty? And she was Chatty Betty before she put her luggage in the overhead. She said, oh, I have a seatmate. I'm so excited. And she's putting her luggage in, and I'm thinking, this isn't going to end well. I don't know how I'm going to tell her that I have a headache and I'm exhausted and I just want wheels down in New York and I do not want to talk from Cleveland to LaGuardia. Turns out she was lovely. Chatty Betty and I talked the entire way home. And we're going out the jetway, and we get to the end, and I said, you know, it was really nice talking to you. Maybe we can exchange cards. Maybe we'll have lunch sometime. And she said, oh, no. I don't give my card to anybody. I said, why not? You just talked to me for 2.5 hours. She said, because everyone has a story to tell. She said, but you have a story to tell. And she took my card. She was a literary agent. She became my agent. She told me I was going to write a book for her. I said, I don't have time to write a book. She said, oh, you're going to write a book. She sold it to a publisher. She sold it to 20th Century Fox, and she now has my second book. I don't make a move without Chatty Betty. She is on my speed dial, and the takeaway, engage in the world around you. You never know. She has changed my entire life. You never know what's hiding in plain sight. Thank you again.